Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CircuitPython Weekly for June 24th, 2019. This is the time we get together every week to talk about CircuitPython and everything surrounding it. I'm Katney. I am sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is a version of Python that runs on tiny computers called microcontrollers. CircuitPython development is sponsored by Adafruit, so please support them by purchasing hardware from adafruit.com. Take a look there and check it out if you want to get started with CircuitPython. There's all kinds of ways to get started, and Adafruit can help you out with that. This meeting is recorded. We host it in the Discord, the Adafruit Discord, and in the CircuitPython text channel and the CircuitPython audio channel. So both audio and the Discord text channel are recorded, and the video will go up on YouTube once it's done. So you can check that out. We also are podcasts. So if you would you rather listen to it, check out on most podcast services. Please let us know if we're missing any. If your favorite podcast service does not host this podcast, let us know. So you can join Discord anytime. We are there all week at adafru.it/discord. You can join up and come to the CircuitPython text channel or the Help with CircuitPython text channel, depending on what your situation is. And we're there all week. So this meeting happens every Monday, typically, at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And unless there's a U.S. holiday, in which case it gets moved or skipped. And if you want to know about those events, please let us know and we can add you to the CircuitPythonistas role on Discord. And we tag once or twice a week just to let you know about the weekly and about the notes doc. So there is a document that has all the notes from the weekly. So if you are more interested in reading it, instead of watching it, you can also do that. It will be linked in the YouTube video, the bottom of the YouTube video, and it's all up on GitHub. So you can go back and read previous notes as well. And also there are timestamps throughout the notes. So if you scan through the notes and you find something interesting that you do want to watch on YouTube, you can scrub to that point and listen to the things that are most important to you. This meeting is held in 5 sections. The first section is community news, where we talk about things that are going on in the community surrounding Python and CircuitPython, all on hardware. The next section is state of CircuitPython and libraries, where we do a statistical overview of the entire project, including the core and the libraries. Next section is hug reports, where we take the opportunity to call people out for doing something good. The next section is status updates, where everyone takes a couple minutes to talk about what they've been doing over the last week and what they will be doing over the next week. It's an opportunity to sort of sync up and also to get tips and tricks from others if you're running into any issues. And the last section we lovingly call In the Weeds, which is an opportunity for more long-form discussions that may be too much for status updates. If you have any ideas for In the Weeds, please post them to the CircuitPython text chat anytime during the meeting and or put them in the notes, and we will get to them when we get to the end. If you are ever interested in not so much attending because you can't make it to the meeting, but you would like your status updates or hug reports read off, you can always add them to the notes doc when it's posted to the CircuitPython channel, and we will read them off. If you are lurking and you are just listening in, please let us know. And so we will skip over you when we go through status reports and hug reports and status updates, rather. So the first thing we have is community news, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil.
Thanks, Katney.
Absolutely.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You sound excellent because we have a ton of boosts on our server. So thank you everyone who did this. It means we have 256K audio. If we get to 50, we get the 384. I don't know if that's actually going to make a difference, but there was a sound quality update, which is really nice. So thank you everyone who did that. Teardown was this weekend. So I'll do some hug report style things and more. Thank you, Melissa, for tweeting the interesting CircuitPython and Python running hardware from teardown and all sorts of things. It's in the newsletter. This week's newsletter is our biggest Python on hardware newsletter in as long as we've been doing it, as far as content, photos, videos, news, and everything that's going on. In fact, there could be even more, but we eventually have to stop and ship it. So that'll be tomorrow morning, and that's the link I just put in the chat. Reminder, the folks at Microsoft, they're dedicating a bunch of resources to making Python on hardware easier and better. And so they have their summer interns and some of their Visual Studio Code staff working on just doing that. So how do you get CircuitPython, MicroPython, other forms of Python on hardware to work better and easier with Visual Studio?
Mhm.
So take the survey and say how you use Visual Studio and how you would like to use it with Python on hardware. Today, we had to wake up super early because Raspberry Pi 4 came out, and we had one. And we are pleased to report it'll be running Blinkish shortly. So that's neat. But when they release their morning in the UK, it's like our early morning, and then like half the internet went down because of an AWS outage. So it was a fun morning. Next up, this is what I'm most excited about this week. Um, we have the guide for the Python Choose Your Own Adventure. We're also calling it Piper Card. Dave Stells worked on this. I wanted to do this guide, but as usual, it's like I could work at a company and have a bunch of guide writers. It's hard for me to write guides. But I had a demo, I had a prototype in it, and it works good. And Dave did the documentation, so you can finally do your own choose your own adventures or HyperCard style things with CircuitPython. I think over the weekend there was some type of Twitter choose your own adventure where you get to be Beyonce's assistant, and I think that would be a nice one too, or that you can put on the Pi portal. Like you have to decide if Beyonce wants something. You have to click like, yes, I will go to the gym, or no, I will go out and have fun. So that if you have interactive fiction or choose your own adventure things you want to do, the constraints of a device are really nice. So check that out. CircuitPython had a bunch of stories in the latest Hackspace. I just put those links up and a link to the PDF. Ben, the editor-in-chief, had a really neat CircuitPython, Circuit Playground Express, multifunction board, multifunction USB connected game controller. Check that out. I think there's a lot of crowd supply things that went live. There was the giant board that's a feather format that was released to teardown, and then also there's a CircuitPython powered hub. And for me, I have like a collection of things that run CircuitPython, so it's getting even more interesting. Like here's a hub, and then here's this other thing. So you could check that out. And then two last things for community. A couple events came in. So CircuitPython Day is 8/8/2019. So we have a CircuitPython meetup in India, and that's at the Delhi Technical University for Women on August 4th. And we also have one in New York City, and that's going to be at NYC Resistor, getting started with programming on microcontrollers on August 3rd. This week on our shows, we have Naomi from the Python Software Foundation. We have Nina from Microsoft, who's known for her keynotes and more with Python on hardware. So this week will be an exciting week too. And thus concludes community news for the week.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is the state of CircuitPython and the libraries. This is a statistical overview of the entire project. We start with an overall look at it, then we go into the core, and then we'll talk about the libraries separately. So let's see. Overall, we had 20 pull requests merged by 9 authors. D. Halbert, D. Estells, Barbador, C47D, Deshipu, Carter, Scott, CP Forbes, and Brent. And 6 reviewers, Dan Halbert, Lady Ada, Scott, the Kitty, myself, and Jerry. So thanks to everybody who was involved with that. We had 17 issues closed by 9 people and 11 opened by 8 people. So we are net down overall, which is great. Overall, 4.0.1 stable has been out for a while and has been pretty solid. 4.1.0 beta was released with some serious speedups, and many have been testing it successfully. We're working on adding more display fixes and features and new Bluetooth features. 4.1.0 beta could become 4.1.0 stable very soon. There are a few other fixes that need to go in, and the BLE stuff, the Bluetooth stuff, will probably be a 5x beta because the APIs will change. So please keep testing your projects and let us know how they work. That's the best way right now for you to help us out, is finding any kind of bugs and that sort of thing in this code. And if you have existing projects that you were using on 4.0.1, let us know if they're sped up on 4.1.0, because that was our goal, and so far all the feedback has been that it's been great. There's a lot of activities on the libraries, which is great. If you're looking to help out, consider looking into the library PRs and issues, see if anything looks interesting. Feel free to ask any questions. We can definitely help you get started. So now I would like to talk about the core. So we had 8 pull requests merged by 5 authors and 2 reviewers. We currently have 6 open pull requests. Those are listed in the notes. There were 10 closed issues by 5 people and 4 open by 2 people, so we're net down on the core, leaving 179 open issues. We currently have 6 active milestones. The important ones are 4.1.0, there's 1 open issue. 4x has 36 open issues on features. 4xx has 4 open issues for bug fixes. 5x has 2 open issues, and then we have the 5 issues not assigned to a milestone, which we need to make sure that we avoid, because they can get missed if they're not tagged with a milestone. So please make sure that if you file an issue, if you have the ability to tag it to a milestone, please do. If you do not, please let us know that you filed an issue so we can make sure that that gets added. So we have download stats by board, which I will not go over individually, but 4.0.1 Sable for the last week has 5,074 downloads, and 4.1.0 Beta 0 has 210. In terms of downloads by language, we have mostly US English, but behind that is French, German, Pirate, Spanish, and the spread is about the same for 4.1.0 beta. So next we'll talk about the libraries. So we had 12 pull requests merged by 4 authors and 4 reviewers, with 31 open pull requests at the moment. Some of these are long-term, some of them are more recent. Feel free to take a look at those, like I said. They're in the notes and also available on CircuitPython.org, which I will talk about in a moment. There were 7 closed issues by 5 people and 7 open by 6 people, so we are net 0 change on that for 109 open issues. The list of issues and pull requests and all sorts of stuff is available on circuitpython.org/libraries/contributing. If you are interested in getting started with CircuitPython, it's an excellent place to look. There are a few sections there. One is the open pull requests, one is open issues, which is spread across all of the library repos and is organized as such. So you can pick something you're interested in and take a look at that. And then also there are library infrastructure issues. We have a standard for how we want to keep the libraries to make it much easier for maintaining. And as we adapt that standard, earlier libraries will not fit it. And so there is a list of issues that are library level issues, not so much issues with the code per se. So all of that stuff is available there. If you have any questions about getting started, need any help with Git or GitHub, feel free to ping us in the CircuitPython chat, and we are always willing to help you out with that. We have 1 new library, the PYOA, which is the Choose Your Own Adventure library. And I will quickly read the list of updated libraries because, again, it is short this week. The BME 280, the MLX 90393, the TSL 2561, the MPL 3115A2, and HID. So those are all the libraries that have been either added or changed in the last 7 days. And that concludes the state of CircuitPython and the libraries. So next up is Hug Reports. Hug Reports is an opportunity to call people out for doing something good, which doesn't happen enough. We actually snagged this from an internal Adafruit meeting bit it's our counter to bug reports, basically. The idea is if somebody did something cool, did something good during the week, feel free to call them out for it. It's a chance to be supportive and a chance to just, give people recognition for the things that they are doing. It will go in a round robin. I will start as an example, and then we'll go down the list alphabetically. If people are lurking or text only, I will be reading off, and they have something in the notes, I will be reading off their entries as we go through alphabetically. And once we reach the bottom, we'll loop back to the top, etc., and work through it that way. So I will start. So I want to give a hug report to Maker Melissa for letting me bounce ideas about PyBadger off of her and also providing feedback. Been working through that, and obviously having more than one set of eyes on any given piece of code, especially when it's something that's going to be used heavily, is good, because multiple viewpoints on it make for better code. I want to say thanks to Radomir for helping with implementing buttons properly in PyBadger. The way I had them implemented was incorrect. It would actually clear any of the previous button presses, which is not good because you may need to store multiple button presses. I want to say thanks to Roy for helping with writing the debug I2C library, which is to say writing the debug I2C library. We took the debug statements out of bus device, and we needed to re-add them. I'll explain that in a bit. But thank you for that. And then thank you to Melissa again for testing the debug I2C on Raspberry Pi with Blinka. I want to say thanks to Phil for PyBadger graphics. The library that I am writing, I named PyBadger, as it is a combination library for PyBadge and PyGamer, and now I have a purple badger as a mascot for my library, which is super exciting. Hug report to Melissa and Scott for being CircuitPython at Teardown. Thanks for being there and documenting all that. And then another hug to the community moderators on Discord for keeping up with everything. I usually, by the time there's an issue, I go to take a look at it and it's already been taken care of, which is amazing. You guys are totally rocking it out. And that is my hug report. So next up, Looselev, are you lurking or do you have hug reports? I am going to assume lurking. All right, next up is Melissa, who has notes in the document but is lurking, so I will read those off. Scott for his awesome talk that he gave at Teardown. Kattni, myself, for her work on PyBadger. S-Light for finishing up testing on the Pocket Beagle. Grogard for finally getting his giant board launched. And a group hug to so many awesome people that I met at Teardown. Okay. Michelle is lurking. Nathan Robinson, are you lurking? Going to assume yes. Excellent. Okay. S-Light, do you have any hug reports? S-Light is typing. Lurking. Excellent. Okay. That means next up is Sedacious.
Hey, I just have a group hug to the mods for being awesome and helping address things that came up in the past week, and just for making the Adafruit Discord a happy place to be, a place that you would not mind taking grandma to, and yeah, in general, just helping out, make things awesome. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. So I have some notes from Summersoft, who is not here, so I will read those off. Arturo 182 for getting time to come back and the work on that sweet handheld. To Scott and Melissa for representing at Teardown, and a group hug. And T. Joing, are you lurking as well, or do you have hug reports? Going to guess lurking. All right. That means next up is Scott, who is not here. So I will read off his hug reports. Maker Melissa for highlighting all of the awesome things she saw at Teardown on Twitter. Crowd Supply for hosting Teardown and everyone I met and chatted with. Galen for driving us both down to Portland from Teardown. And everyone for continuing to be awesome so I can step away. All right. And that means next up is AT Maker's Bill.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So first, Dan Halbert did a ton of work trying to get the AAC devices, the little talkers, working, and we still have some issues, but it wouldn't have launched if he hadn't spent the time he did. So thanks on that. For Lamore and whoever else helped make the Pi portal, it is a speech device in a box, so it made that possible. And then last weekend I was at NomCon in Chattanooga, and twice something went horribly wrong, and I was able to pull out a circuit playground with CircuitPython on it and just fix it. So we had Christine Getman from Magic Wheelchair was going to present and couldn't advance her own slides, and I was able to just very quickly make a capacitive touch button for her. She has SMA. I have a video on that out there. And then the Magic Wheelchair reveal, like a half an hour before the reveal, the lights broke. And I was literally able to just hook the lights up, make them blue. Yeah, they're not fancy and they're not going with the music, but I was able to just do it in about 10 minutes. So that was awesome.
Excellent.
I guess that's a group hug. I just said CircuitPython. I didn't know group hugs were a thing.
That's all good. CircuitPython hugs are also excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Next up is Carter.
Yeah, I got a couple. Big one to Jerry N for reviewing a couple of PRs I was able to make last week. He got right on those. And another ongoing huge one to Lady Ada for always finding cycle time. Get up. It's amazing. She's all over the place. Not sure how she does it. That's it. All
right. Thanks very much. Next up is Charles, who is text only today, so I will read that off. General group hug to all. All right. Christella is lurking, so next up is Dan.
Hi.
Hello.
So thanks to Lady Ada for working on a Python version of Logo Turtle, which is great. We should have done that a long time ago, and it's yet another, fills out the portfolio of what you can do with CircuitPython. Thanks to B. Meisels for noticing an issue. They had a custom board with 4 NeoPixels on it that was running NRF with an NRF52, and it wasn't working right. It would only work with 1 pixel, not 4, and it turned out there was a bug in the NRF NeoPixel code. So they noticed that, and we were able to fix it really quickly. Thanks to Scott for another speed up of display. He noticed that there was a delay that was 1 millisecond that should have been 1 microsecond. So that sped up another aspect of a certain display. And then thanks to CP Forbes for putting in a pull request for a request that someone else made, which was when we reformat the CircuitPy drive, it would be nice if it had an empty lib directory. Maybe that was your idea, Kenny. I can't remember. But that now there is an empty lib directory there, so you don't have to make it yourself. You
Excellent.
can just dump things in it. Okay, that's it.
All right. Dave P., are you lurking? Excellent. Okay. Next up is Deshipu, who has no mic today, so I will be reading that off. To Arturo 182 for Sweet Featherwing and exercising display IO a bit. Next up is Jerry.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks to Dan and Lady Ada for helping me understand what turned out to be a non-issue with the PyPortal I2C, but there was a lot of back and forth and discussion. It was really helpful. And Dave Astells for the new adventure library and his quick response to some simple suggestions. It was really fun to play with.
Excellent. All right, and that is Hug Reports. Next up is Status Updates. Status Updates is an opportunity for you to talk about what you've been doing over the past week, what you're going to do over the next week, and possibly get tips and tricks from others on any questions that you have. Anything that makes more sense as a long form discussion will make more sense in the weeds, which is the next and last section of the meeting. So if you think of anything that works for in the weeds, please post it to the text chat or the notes doc, and we will circle back to it when we get to it. Status updates is actually how this whole meeting started. It was initially between Scott, Dan, and I before I joined Adafruit as an opportunity for Scott and Dan to sync up on what was going on with CircuitPython. And it evolved into this amazing community group meeting, which is fantastic. So we still have our happy status updates. So I will start once again. It will go in a round robin alphabetically once again. If you are text only, please post either in the notes doc or in the text chat, and I will read it off alphabetically. And for those that have notes in the notes doc and are lurking, I will be reading those off as well as we go. So first things first, time codes. So last week, I updated the e-ink guide with a new pinouts diagram. We have a community member who's been doing some really fancy pinouts diagrams for various boards for us, and so we've been slowly updating the guides with those as they come in. I did a fritzing object for the 4H CPX, which was a bit of a beast, and ended up needing help with that one, but got that sorted. And then did a motor bonnet fritzing, so we have the object for that, and then updated the motor bonnet guide, or the motor kit guide with the bonnet. All the code's the same, so we just needed to put images up of it. Tested the EPD update on the 2.13-inch e-ink display. The fill issue is still present. When you do fill for rectangles, it does every other line, so it's just a series of lines instead of a full rectangle, and it's only on the 2.13-inch. It's not an issue with EPD, it's an issue with something talking to that particular piece of hardware. So the debug bus device thing was that bus device is frozen into a lot of builds, and there was debug print statements optionally available there, and it was taking up a lot of space. And space is something that is a hot commodity on the smaller boards. So we opted to remove it. However, having debug capabilities is an excellent idea. So the first thought was to create a wrapper of bus device that had the debug stuff in there, which, because of the way the debug stuff works, got super complicated and ended up being, we just ended up duping the whole library, which is a terrible idea for maintenance purposes, because you have to remember to update both if you ever update bus device. So we scrapped that in favor of debug I2C, which is actually a wrapper of the base I2C code, instead of the next level up, which is bus device. So it's Python library, and the way you use it is you import it, and then you pass the I2C object. So when you create the I2C object with the pins, you pass it into debug I2C, and then as there's any traffic, or you just, you write your code to do whatever, and then there's traffic, it all prints out the debug hex stuff to the REPL. So it's a wrapper of I2C, which is its own deal, and implementing and maintaining it will be much simpler. Plus, it actually has more information than the other one did, and if we need more information than is currently in there, we can always add more at a later date. Got a lot of help with writing that up, got that tested. It works, just need to document it. And in creating that, realized that perhaps we should have a debug SPI as well, which we never had in bus device. But Melissa said would be a great idea for work on displays, which she's doing a lot of. So I have attempted to tackle debug SPI, which is to say, I didn't write debug I2C, so this is me hoping that I learned something from going through debug I2C after it was written, and we'll see. I haven't tested it yet, but it is written. So hopefully that works, and then I'll document that and get it out, and those will both be 2 new libraries available for debugging purposes. As well, last week, PyBadger. It's a wrapper library for PyBadge and PyGamer, which makes using all the main functions, accelerometer, buttons, neopixels, all that stuff, super easy to use. And also has badge, like auto badge creation functionality. It's going to have auto QR generation functionality, and also like a business card, basically, where you press a button and it shows a picture of your face and your email address or something to that effect. And implemented the buttons initially wrong and then implemented them properly. Implemented an auto dimming feature where if the accelerometer is not moving, it dims the screen, so it's using less battery. So if you set it down and you're not using it, it'll dim it to whatever setting you decide to set it to. And then over the weekend, I worked on my keynote. For those of you that don't know, I was invited to be the opening keynote for PyOhio, which is a regional Python conference at the end of July, held in Columbus, Ohio. So the closer I get to that, the more I will be working on that. But right now it's in early stages. So I still am dealing with the outline, essentially. But it should be a lot of fun, if not terrifying. So this week, Library Monday, which I always say, but really it's library all the time. So if there's anything that I've missed, any PRs, that sort of thing, please feel free to tag me. If I haven't responded to you in 24 to 48 hours, and it's something that you need my input on, I am not offended if you tag me again. Things do slip, and I miss things, and sometimes do not know to go back. I need to, need to add PyOhio to the newsletter for upcoming events. Finish documenting debug I2C, test and document debug SPI, and or rewrite it if it's wrong. There was an issue with implementing the QR code stuff because the example code was not updated to match the CircuitPython updates. So Lemore actually updated the mini QR example, and I need to test that and then have the opportunity to implement that in PyBadger. So continue work on PyBadger, the business card function, and the QR code support are the next two things. I need to file an issue on the CircuitPython repo for a safe mode crash into the hard fault handler, which I by default assumed was me, but once I mentioned it, was told that it was probably not me. I have a piece of code that pretty reliably reproduces a safe mode crash. And so I need to file an issue on that. We have a new pinouts diagram for the MCP 9600, so I need to update that guide. Still sitting on blog posts and photo processing from PyCon. And then a couple other guide things that I need to do at some point, but those are lower priority than the rest. And that is what's going on with me. Next up is Maker Melissa, who is lurking. So I will read off her notes. Last week, added a bunch of Raspberry Pi boards to Blinka, cleaned up the Arduino Feather OLED library, added DragonBoard 410C to Blinka, spent the weekend at Teardown 2019. This week, test Orange Pi R1 SPI in UART, write DragonBoard 410C guide, write up some Raspberry Pi stuff, and attending brunch with Hackaday on Monday morning and driving back after. So we have a bunch of lurkers, and I believe that means next up is Sedacious.
Howdy, howdy. So last week I got the DS3502 guide as done as it can be for now because we're waiting on the final hardware to do diagrams and stuff like that. I also did the downloads page for the airlift shield for the guide that Brent was doing, and as part of that, got the fritzing object done and then a couple of the other diagrams for the downloads page. I tested Rev A of the OLED friend that we're using to test some new OLED panels. It was not working. I made it work, and with Lemore's help, we got a Rev B out to the fab for testing. Similarly, we spun up a new rev for the DS3502 that adds quick connectors to make connecting via I2C a little bit easier, and moved some things around, added some widgets, and I have a cat meowing at me. There he is. Let's see, what else did I do? I made some progress on a super secret personal project that will be revealed at some point in time in the future, most likely. Let some smoke out in the process, but actually got it working to my content enough that I can get started on a new rev and get going on that.
Nice.
So next week I am working on, or rather this week, I guess, I'm working on a footprint for a uBlocks Wi-Fi module that may or may not be showing up in the future. I'm also working on the VCNL 4040 drivers. I got the Arduino driver to do more work on, and then possibly some tweaks to the CircuitPython driver as well. That's a topic that we will return to at when we get to In the Weeds, hopefully. And then also, hopefully, but probably not, but hopefully I'll get Rev B hardware for the DS3502 and OLED Friends to get spun up and test sometime this week, but we'll see how fast it comes. And that's it for me.
Excellent. Thanks. Next up is Summersoft, who is lurking, so I will read off his notes. Rosie Pi, Rosie app. At a point now that I need to start moving dev to the Raspberry Pi. Spent the last few days setting up of Ansible playbooks, which will be used in a pull fashion to both initially and continually keep the Raspberry Pi up to date. Excellent. Tammy is lurking. Next up is Scott, who is also not here, so I will be reading off his notes as well. Teardown this past weekend. Video of talk is here. There is a link in the notes. Connected with lots of great folks, and I'm looking forward to growing our community. Driving back from Portland on Monday morning. Want to release a new beta this week. Light week overall to get caught up with things, including normally weekend house tasks. And that means that we are with, next up is Bill.
Hello again.
Hello.
So we are actually out of the weeds with the camp AAC devices. We still have some problems there that I need to feed back in as issues. We've seen some SD card corruption, and I actually saw the entire CircuitPy file system just disappear one day. These are not being handled gently. They're being thrown down slides and stuff. But those were the two things that I didn't. I expect like wires to come loose, but those two surprised me. So I'll turn those in. I'm working on cleaning up a XAC fork. We're still getting pushback from Microsoft on delaying on them. We'll get to it soon. It's still the answer from Microsoft on fixing some issues on their firmware. So I need to actually get this done and out. So I will work on that first. And then I'm really at the point where I'm just ready to just ship the guide for the hand raiser so we can say that it's done. I was looking for Mac testing, and we're not going to get that done. So I may cut some of that section, but otherwise I think the guide's ready. So if Mike B is okay with it, I'd like to get that out and pushed.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Next up is Carter.
Yeah, I got a couple PRs in that fix some minor lingering I2C related things on a couple sensors, MPL 3 something MLX. They all have just fun numbers and whatnot, and a couple more lingering of the same things in terms of what we'll be working on in the future. So just all kind of like low level, nothing hugely breaking I2C quirky kind of things. And most of them are kind of on Linux, possibly an In the Weeds discussion. We'll see. And that's it.
All right. Thanks. Next up is Charles, who is lurking but has notes, so I will read them off. Got my breath controller integrated with the Helm software synth. I'm trying to create a demo song. All right. That means next up is Dan.
Okay, so as I mentioned, there was a bug in the NRF low-level NeoPixel write routine, and it was just an error in the calculation of the size of a piece of storage. So that was fixed. Make Code Arcade is doing some work on PyBadge, so we needed a new release of bootloader. I did that over the weekend. I finished BLE scanner code, and also that caused a lot of cleanup to happen internally in the BLE code. And I'm now working on BLE Central, and the idea is that it should be able to support a sort of minimum functionality BLE UART, which is what we already have implemented on the peripheral side. So in BLE, there's central and peripheral. Those are the two different things that talk to each other. And a peripheral is usually a small device, and a central is often a host computer or a phone or something, but that doesn't have to be that way. So I think I will try to make a release, some kind of alpha or beta release as soon as central sort of works. And then the next steps after that are to work on BLE HID, probably. So, but the idea is to also have people try out the API. The lower level API will change somewhat, and then there will also be some Python wrappers that will hide the details, the ugly details of the lower level API. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Dave is lurking. So next up is Deshipu, who I will read off. All right. Ported the Jumper Wire game to Display.io on PyGamer. There is a link in the notes there. Some feedback from that, which has a link as well for Hackaday. And then also ported the Bouncing Balls demo, planning to write a guide on that. Fantastic. And that means next up is Jerry.
Hi. Yeah, a couple of fun little things this week. And one was a very confusing issue that came up on the PyPortal when you plug an I2C device in on the default setting, which has 5 volts going out on the JST connector's VCC pin. And it's been an issue that's come up a few times in the past, and people have had some issues with I2C, but the sensors generally work. But this person noticed that when they did this, the real-time clock stopped. And so really started questioning and looking into it more. And after a lot of discussion and troubleshooting and testing and talking with Dan and Lady Ada, the basic resolution is don't do that. You really, if you're going to use I2C, I2C, you should set the voltage to 3 volts. And that's now more clearly documented in the guide. So I think that will help a lot.
Excellent.
And it's not an issue on some of the future boards. There's been some redesign of the circuit to make it more adaptable. And then there was an issue that came up with the seesaw that others may want to keep an eye out for if you're seeing some new funny behavior. As part of that testing, I was playing with the 5 volt thing. I thought I broke one of my sensors because it wasn't working anymore. It had been working a week ago, and then all of a sudden it just was giving really, really funny results, and I just didn't understand it at all. So this is one of the little stem of soil sensors. The temperature value was just crazy. So after a lot of head scratching and debugging of that, I found out that all it had to be done was that a slight increase in the delay for the I2C read to the seesaw had to be added in for the temperature read. And it turns out that we think, at least my guess, is that the recent speed ups and everything have contributed to that. And so that now things are running so much faster, especially on like the M4, that there need to be a little bigger delay. So just a heads up to keep an eye out for it, and that is fixed for the seesaw. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then I started playing with. I have a couple of the little TFT feather wings. So on one I have an M4 Express, and one I have an NRF 52840, and I'd noticed some clearly different responses. You know, the way that they respond to screen updates, especially running the slideshow. And so I decided to do a little more testing of that, and found that clearly there is a difference. Well, the new speed ups make a huge difference, and they're so much better. But even with all that, the NRF 52840 is clearly slower. It's about half the update speed for putting up a new screen image. which it doesn't appear to really be surprising because the NRF 52840 has a slower clock and a slower SPI interface. But again, it's just something to be aware of, and I'll try and do some more better documentation of it as time goes on. That's my project for the next week, I hope.
All right. Excellent. And that is the end of status updates, which brings us to In the Weeds. Okay. So In the Weeds is an opportunity for more long-form discussions about whatever we want to talk about. Anything that was covered in status updates and required something longer, or things that were not covered in status updates and just people wanted to bring up and figured it would turn into a more long-form discussion. So first up, we have something from Bill, and I will turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Kattni. So there's a conference in September, and our group is one of the groups running it. It's in Pittsburgh. And they reached out to me yesterday, John Flaherty did, and said, look, we'd love to have somebody from Adafruit, from the CircuitPython team, we're using all these devices to create AT, and half the things we make there have your parts in them. Do you think anybody from Adafruit would want to come, whether to speak or just to be here, or so we can thank them, kind of stuff? And I suggested Dan Halbert, or anybody else if Dan can't be there. I know we're not going to get Lemoore. I got that. But if there's anybody near Pittsburgh or would like to travel, and I actually really like Pittsburgh. I thought it was going to be an armpit, but it's a wonderful town. Just let me know. We'd love to have you.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know.
Oh, and while we're here, I just did post something in the on the text. If we do switch over to the 3.3 volt on the Pi portal, I'm not sure we can power it by battery anymore. So it's just something we might want to get somewhere in a note.
Oh, okay. Good to know. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So next up, I have a kind of PSA from Carter. Take it away.
Sure. Yeah, this is related to it happened several times. It's happened in the past, and since it kind of keeps happening, I'm wondering how well known this is to the general public. So that's why I kind of call it a PSA here. I wrote up a little code block examples, which I will paste in. So basically it looks like this. So the issue will be on Linux single board computers. Definitely on a Raspberry Pi, which is the only thing I've used it on, so I'm not really sure how much this goes out, but apparently it's something in the Linux kernel, so I'd imagine to be on any Linux SBC. So in CircuitPython, on a CircuitPython board, you can do the first thing. You can do the two commands, write and read into it, and have a stop equal false. But Linux won't respect that stop equal false, so you have to use that second form with the single command to get a repeated start to work on Linux. So since we have a lot of drivers that have been written prior to Blinka, there's a lot of that first form out there in our drivers, and eventually someone tries them via Blinka on a Linux board, and weird things possibly happen. So it's a pretty simple fix when you run into that, to just change to that next form. And that's the gist of it.
All right.
Just kind of wanted to get that out there.
Thanks very much. Next up is Sedacious.
Hey, so I don't know if this is a topic or not. I don't think it is. I think we've probably talked about it previously. But I'm working on the VCNL 4040 driver for Arduino, and in doing so is looking back at the CircuitPython one to cheat off of, because Cat makes good drivers. And I ran into looking at the interrupt code, and kind of like the 345, 340, whatever accelerometers. The VCNL 4040 is a chip that has a shared status register for the interrupts. So there's multiple interrupt types that can be triggered, and whether or not any one of them has been triggered is all, they each have individual bits in a single register. And if you check this register, in this case and many other cases, it clears all of the bits, assuming you know what the status is of all of the interrupts and can do something with it. Because most times this is being done by, interrupt pin gets toggled and then you are responding in an ISR or something like that. The problem is when we have interrupt checking functions or attributes that check that register for one interrupt type, but don't do anything with the rest of the values that might be being stored in that register. So it's possible that you'll, check for interrupt type A. Interrupt type B will also have been triggered, but when you check for interrupt A, the status of interrupt B will get cleared. So the next time you check for B, you'll get a false, even though it should be true. I handled this in the 345 driver or the 340X driver by stuffing the status of all of the registers into a hash or something, and then reporting on it when they're checked based on the status of what's in there, and then clearing them out one by one as needed. I think that probably actually still needs more attention, but the larger thing is like, how should we handle that? Like, how should we, how do we want to, I want to have a consistent way for users to expect these things to work. And I have a cat again, very chatty today. His name is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise, for people that are listening. Anyways, so yeah, so how, thoughts, anything people have about this would be great to hear.
I mean, how you did it in the other one sounds reasonable, I assume. It's a little outside my wheelhouse, so it's stretching a bit on what, in which I guess my point is, you seem to have a handle on it, so why don't you come up with how you want to do it and we can go through that at that point.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine. I mean, the basic idea is like there's state that gets lost when you check that register,
right?
And that can have a bad feels for whoever is caring about that state. And there's other similar stuff too, where like, I mean, we don't need to go into it now, but there are other cases. It seems like we might want to be handling like storing some miscellaneous state in the driver object, because we don't do things quite the way people expected them to be used when they were creating these chips. So but yeah, I'll go ahead and probably just put in a PR for the VCNL 4040, and then we can discuss it there or bring it up next week or however we want to do it.
That sounds good.
Katney?
Yes.
That might explain a problem I've been MC 2301-7. I try to read the pin change list, because it's if you forget to set the or them to get the interrupts together, it doesn't come out right. So that you finally given me a clue as to
okay. Feel free to
I will put a issue up about that.
Thank you.
As I get some time. Okay.
Yep. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. Excellent. So yeah. So just put something in. We will we'll discuss it and come up with what we think is the best option. Since at this point it's something we're designing, so what we want is what it is. So next up, in the weeds, we have something from Michelle, who has some questions that they would like to discuss. And I will let them put it into the text chat before reading it off. All right, so there's two questions. To give a little context here, Michelle is part of a group of Microsoft interns in Vancouver who are working on a project related to physical computing, which is they're working on an extension, a CircuitPython related extension for VS Code. And they are looking for some input on that. So the first question is, have you ever used a device simulator for your project, like the ones on Make Code? And how did you find it helpful for your project? And the second question is, if you can have a tool with the features of the followings, how would you rank them? And the tools that are requested to be ranked is a debugger, a device simulator that supports lots of sensors for your board, or deploy to device, having a better experience for deploying your CircuitPython code to your board without having to install the library and configure the board all manually yourself. You hit a save to board button and it will install it for you. They're currently working on an extension that has a device simulator for Circuit Playground Express, and are looking for feedback on that to make it as great as they possibly can. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, feel free to type them into the chat or let us know. I don't know if anyone has any immediate feedback or not. All right, so Carter says that for the second question, that deploying to device sounds good. That would be highest ranked for Carter. Bill says step debugging is his number one request. Sedacious says deploy to device, debugger, and device simulator in that order. Summersoft says that he's partially used a device simulator previously and that he agrees the deploy device would be his top option as well. Dave P says I've used Android device simulators, fairly helpful. And for the 3 steps, I would rank 2, 1, 3 in that order. So hopefully, Michelle, that gives you some feedback and helps you out. Michelle, did you guys post these questions to anywhere at a link, like a survey or anything to that effect? Okay. If you do, feel free to post it to this channel. We will include it in the newsletter as well when we can. And do that. Hey, C. Grover. Welcome late. All right, I think we are good to go. C. Grover is typing. Just typing responses. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we've reached the end of In the Weeds as well. So it's time to wrap up. This has been the CircuitPython Weekly for, wait for it, June 24th, 2019. I want to say thank you to all of our new people that attended today. We're really great. It's really great to have you. Lurking is a fantastic way to join us. We love lurkers. So you can always feel free to listen in anytime you want. And if you feel like actually talking with us, that is also a great thing. So this weekly is held most Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we are available all week on the Adafruit Discord server at adafru.it/discord. So if you want to join us anytime during the week, feel free. Once again, this will go up on YouTube and to many podcast services, as well as the notes will be added to a GitHub repo, so you have many opportunities to listen to this later if you choose, or listen to or read about this later if you choose to do so. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.